Although I've been knitting for many years, it was only in the last decade or so that I really started knitting shawls. In this video, I'll talk briefly about why I avoided shawls for so long, and then take a look at 5 shawl patterns that changed everything for me. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'm also going to talk about a make-along, a mystery shawl make-along that I'm going to be taking part in the month of May. For many years, I didn't knit shawls, even though I love to knit. And looking back on it, I think there were several reasons for that. The first one is I'm just not the kind of person who, feels comfortable wearing a shawl out in public. So my thought was, since, I tend to make sweaters and hats and scarves and mittens and things that I actually wear, why would I make an item that I'm not going to wear? Secondly, I think I had in mind this idea that shawls always had to be these, very flowy, lacy, frilly things. Again, not my style. And when I did try to make a couple of shawls, sort of tentatively initially, I ended up picking patterns that sort of fit that lacy, airy, complicated Shetland lace kind of vibe and was driven nuts by them. For some reason, I also avoided ever using lifelines, and that really just made things all that much more difficult. But then one day, I happened upon a pattern that really kind of changed everything for me. In the first place, it was not knit on teeny tiny needles, and although it had a sort of lacy vibe to it, it also had a concept behind it that I found really interesting. And so for me, that's what's really shaped my journey with shawl knitting, is finding shawls that for whatever reason, there's something about, the artist's brief that intrigues me, and I'm really compelled by the way they sort of use knitted stitches and lace patterning to bring that concept to life. Okay, so the first shawl pattern that changed everything for me, so I think of it as the one that changed it all, is a pattern called Seeds to Flowers by Christina Villemate. And again, I hope I'm saying the designer's name right. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago in the intro comments, this was the first time that I began to realize, you don't need to use tiny needles, you don't need to use lace weight yarn. You can actually use a slightly heavier yarn and slightly larger needles and have a more satisfying process. I liked the concept of Seeds to Flowers, and I'll put links to all of these patterns in the description box below this video. I really like the concept of Seeds to Flowers because it starts with this idea of seeds planted into the ground, and then you move through lace motifs that are reminiscent of stems and leaves and then blossoms. And it's kind of funny because I also knew nothing about using beads in knitting when I started this pattern, but I was so intrigued by Villemate's concept that I was like, I want to try incorporating beads into it as well. Once I realized that shawls and wraps don't necessarily need to be complicated lace patterns, it kind of opened up a wide range of options for me. And so this next pattern is called Granny Smith, and it's the Granny Smith wrap, and it's by a designer named Maanel, and it's basically just a very simple wrap that can be, as long or as short as you want it to be, and it's a very easy pattern to work because you really only have to keep track of the lace work at very set intervals. So, if you're somebody who doesn't mind putting stitch markers at across your knitting, this is definitely a good pattern for you. And what I did with this that helped make it particularly interesting, I don't usually like to work with mohair when I'm making sweaters. I know it's been a trend for quite a few years now, but it was just one I never got into. But I ended up having this mohair that I really liked, and I ended up pairing it with this green yarn that I wasn't quite so keen on the color of green that I had, and I was really happy with how this turned out. The third shawl that really kind of stands out to me as one that I learned a lot from and really enjoyed making is one called Smuggler's Cove by Hopkins. And it's kind of interesting because when I finished this pattern, and well, as I was working through it, I was actually a little bit disappointed in the yarns that I had chosen because I felt that they weren't sort of showing off the pattern in the way that maybe I had anticipated. But now that I look at it now, with a couple of years of hindsight, I actually really like the way they work together. But I think that what I didn't know at that time was, when you're using variegated yarns, you have to kind of choose them very strategically. And so I didn't know about the idea of sort of having an anchor color, and I didn't sort of fully understand the way in which, if you have a pattern, a variegated yarn may end up blurring that pattern a little bit. So when I think back on it, I think that I enjoyed this pattern because I learned about mosaic knitting, and although I was disappointed at the time, in retrospect, I really enjoy the pattern because when I look at it now, I understand why it shaped up the way that it shaped up, and I actually kind of like it for that reason. Okay, so the fourth shawl pattern or wrap pattern that I worked on that stands out in my memory is actually one that I don't have anymore because I gave it away as a gift. And it is the Fox Paws design by Xandy Peters. And I found out about this pattern because I was a fan of Stephanie Pearl McPhee and her blog called The Yarn Harlot, and she worked on this pattern at one point, and I was sort of naively thought, that's cool, I want to make that too. And so I dove in and tried it. Needless to say, it was a little bit outside of my skill set at the time. I would say that I learned a lot about it, and I began to kind of figure out how to work more complicated patterns. And if you've never kind of taken a look at some of Xandy Peters' designs, she's always doing things that are really innovative in terms of the stitches that they use. And so Fox Paws is one of those patterns that has kind of sat in the back of my mind for a very long time as something that I would like to return to now that I have more knitting skills under my belt. And the last pattern that I want to talk about, again, I don't have this one any longer because I gave it away as a gift, but it's a pattern called Darkwing by Rosemary Hill, also known as Romi Hill. And this pattern knit up very quickly. I made the smaller version of it, so there are two versions of it, and you can make a smaller version or a larger version. Okay, so this brings me to the mystery knit along that I've decided to participate in. It is being hosted by Romi Hill, so the designer that designed the Darkwing shawl that I just talked about. And she is hosting a knit along that begins May 22nd, and it's called The Color of Hope. So last year, Romi Hill asked her followers on Ravelry to tell her about the color or colors that they associate with hope and why. And so on the basis of the feedback that she got from her followers, she designed this mystery knit along shawl. And so you can purchase kits if you'd like, but really if you have fingering weight yarn in your stash, and I know you're out there, I'm one of those people, you can simply pair two yarns together. And so she offers a few kind of guidelines for that. She says, do not substitute a yarn of which you have less than 400 yards. So make sure that you've got two 400-yard skeins of yarn. She indicates that the pattern looks best in yarns that won't obscure motifs. And she's using a golden yellow color, and she's starting her shawl with a darker color. The pattern also has a pay what you can model. So she offers several coupon codes, right? If you choose to purchase it without a coupon code, it's $15 US. If you choose to pay less than that, she gives you the coupon codes that you can use for that. Okay, so that's it for 5 of the shawls that I definitely would like to go knit again. I'm kind of intrigued by the question of what colors you associate with hope. So if you've got some thoughts about that, drop it in the comments down below. Similarly, if you have a favorite shawl pattern and would like to tell us about it, please drop that in the comments down below and tell us why. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great week.